Hey, how are you? Welcome back to Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. I'm Alex, your host of this podcast, and this week I'm going to be joined by Audrey, a dear friend and pretty consistent guest of the show. Audrey is the curatorial assistant here at the Montclair Art Museum, and, I don't want to delay too much because we have a pretty lengthy episode that I think is really interesting. On paper, it might sound kind of boring. We're talking about wall labels, and you might be thinking, who cares? I'm at a museum to look at the art. And, I don't necessarily blame you for thinking that, but please allow us the opportunity to assuage that feeling and justify the importance and what you can actually learn and take away from wall labels about, the art, the artist, the movement, the institution. Audrey had so much to say, and I think being that she is a young staffer, both here at MAM and in the museum industry at large, she's a really cool and unique perspective on how institutions can, inject information and history and context into artwork that many people might be seeing for the first time. Anyway, I'm not going to delay any longer. Here is Audrey. Hi, Audrey.
Hi, Alex.
Welcome back on the pod.
Thank you. It's been a while.
I know. I think this is episode 3 for you.
Yeah, episode 3.
Yeah, which is exciting. So first things first, I want to just say that on paper, this might be our most boring episode. I'm not saying it is boring. I think it's deeply fascinating. But I think on paper, literally on paper, the idea of talking about wall labels is almost as boring as watching paint dry. However, your job here today, your tall task is to make it not boring. I don't think it's boring. I think it's deeply fascinating, but I need you to help break this down because I think at the end of the day, what this whole entire show always has been about is about demystifying museums, making them more accessible for people. And I think when somebody walks into a museum, whether it's here at MAM or, insert bigger museum or even smaller museum, it doesn't really matter, that you're experiencing maybe a show or an artist or a retrospective of somebody that you aren't familiar with. Then a lifeline in that gallery becomes the wall labels because you are dependent on that information, that kind of expertise, that almost like depending on the work and stuff, the lyrical nature of getting somebody through the story of these pieces and this artist is vital because, you could walk into a space. Like I think of a show right now, like Nanette Carter, which is the retrospective we all have on view here at MAM. The works are beautiful. They're incredible, but they are abstract, pieces directly stuck to the wall.
Yeah. Aside
from being pretty, there's no way to grasp the person behind the art, and that's where these wall labels come into play. This is my long-winded way of rambling to present the question, why is a wall label important? Why does it matter? Why should people care?
Yeah.
And Audrey, you are our resident representative of Curatorial that comes on the show most frequently. We've had Osana on the show. We've had Gail a few times, obviously, but I feel like I can level with you. Why should people care?
Why should people care? I understand that it probably doesn't sound super glamorous, but I think actually the 3 shows that we have up at the moment, well, we have 4 shows up, but the 3 that I'm thinking of in particular are really good examples of how wall labels are used in different capacities. So you mentioned Nanette Carter, which is an abstract art exhibition. Most abstract art is a language, generally speaking, and abstract artists tend to have their own language within their abstractions that they kind of develop over the course of their life. So in Nanette's show, for instance, not every work has a gallery label in the traditional sense where it gives you, a background on what does this work mean? And that's part of the allure of abstract art, right? But what we do have in that gallery is a didactic that discusses the different eras of her oeuvre. So it's the destabilizing series, the cantilevered series. You've seen
I'm intimately familiar with these works.
Yes,
I've
yes.
done a lot of Nanette Carter content.
And it kind of gives you insight into the different themes that she's approaching in these different eras of her life, the different eras of her practice. Whereas in Interwoven Power, maybe you want to be a little bit less vague. You want to give a little bit more background, history, dates, tribal affiliations, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So those labels are far more extensive than the label copy in Nanette's gallery. And I think basically my point being that the labels have to be suited to the show. They are tailored to the institution. I know that I've been transitioning in my writing style because having come from an academic background before this.
That's something I continue your thought, but you're tapping into something that
I used to write long-winded essays, I used to write research papers that were 15, 20 pages long. So there's a lot more you can say. And when you're writing a wall label, you need to be more succinct. You need to know your audience, and you need to know how to do all of that in an informative and still poetic way.
Mm-hmm.
Guiding the viewer to understand the work without asserting anything, without imposing your own interpretation of the work onto it. So I do think it is really interesting, and there's a lot to be said.
No, definitely. The thing that was kind of dancing in the back of my mind as you were talking is, obviously to a certain degree, this was your area of study in college.
Yeah.
And, is wall label writing something that gets taught to you, or is this purely something that you're like learning on the job? Because that's got to like define the way that you do it, in a way.
Yeah. I mean, so we did have to write label copy during my master's program, even during undergrad, because a big part of the job is, like I said, being succinct but still informative. But it does change with every institution that you're working for. So at the Zimmerli, the audience at my last job when I worked at the Zimmerli Art Museum, the audience was mostly college students. We obviously had elementary schools, middle schools, local coming by, but for the most part, the shows were tailored to the Rutgers population, the Rutgers student population. So in a case like that, you're going to have labels that maybe incorporate more bigger words, for lack of a better term, more
academia, more, like pompous,
more academia. Even you'll see certain wall labels referencing Rutgers history and concepts that are more familiar to the Rutgers student body. Whereas at MAM, a lot of the time we are trying to cater to our local community. We're trying to bring new people in. We're trying to bring families in.
Yeah, totally.
So you want to give people an overview of the art style as a whole, as well as a lot of the time introducing them to a concept or an artist that they've never had experience with before. Yeah,
it feels like you have to achieve a lot of different things in a very short amount of words and a very short word count. And I think it comes down to like, obviously like different exhibitions, different museums, different institutions, whatever, different people writing them are almost like, to me, it feels like you're writing it for different people depending on what the thing is. And like, is that a delicate dance that you have to do where it's like you're writing this broad, almost amorphous kind of description that has to be almost like unreplicable? Like you have to, everyone's different and everyone's for a different audience or different person. And even maybe like one piece has a different meaning and message and audience than like another piece like on the wall right next to it. Like how challenging is that, I guess keeping the voice of these labels like almost like, I guess consistent, but then also catered to it? I feel like I'm rambling, but I
Well,
think I can see you're like gearing up for an
I'm
answer.
thinking about it. There are a few things that I think I've really appreciated about the MAM label copy. One of which is that Gail, our chief curator, knows a lot of the artists that we work with personally. And so you are able to stay true to the artist's message because you're able to speak with the artist. You're able to discuss, the things that they want to accentuate and things that you as an institution would like to, play up. So in Nanette Carter's exhibition, for instance, Gail was hoping to kind of tap into the MAM history a little bit more, So that's something that her and Nanette worked towards mentioning, that Nanette had an intimate relationship with the museum even as a child.
Yeah.
What was your question before this? I lost my train of thought.
It's okay. It doesn't. Listen, we can keep the train rolling. I think you covered, what I was getting at in a way. I one of the things that I was kind of curious about, obviously, like you've been writing more wall labels. It's been something that you're, actively kind of working on in your day-to-day role. One of the things that I think I loved, and I think our audience also really loved about our early conversations is the, kind of the curiosity of curatorial work and the ins and outs of it. And obviously you're somebody who is fresh on the scene in a way. I mean, so am I in the realm of like museums, but like for you working almost like in the trenches in a curatorial department as a young staffer, this is maybe not your first, but some early swings at label writing. Have you struggled to talk about specific artworks or what are some critiques that you have gotten as a young writer in this case?
Yeah, I think I can totally share that. Okay, so as I mentioned, I did kind of struggle with the transition from academic writing to wall label writing. So in a couple of the first drafts of my wall labels for A to Z, Gail had to kind of pull me aside and say, listen, a few of the terms that you're referencing, a few of the concepts that you're referencing are maybe too niche. Like there may be things that our average viewer isn't going to have experience with. These are art history terms that you either have to explain, which takes up a lot of space on the label.
Totally, yeah.
Or you have to kind of decide which parts of this label are most important to someone understanding this particular work of art. I think I am inclined, as someone who came from writing research papers about these artists, to give like a whole overview of their evolution and all of their political ideologies and all of the social movements they were a part of and everyone they were friends with and all of the movements that they, had experience with throughout their lifetime, because all of that is important to understanding the artwork.
Absolutely, yeah.
But as a visitor of a museum, our role as curatorial is to kind of entice them to do that research themselves, to entice them to look into the artist on their own and to go to other museums and to come back here to figure out more about this style or era that they're drawn to.
No, certainly. I'm glad that you kind of touched on that too, because that was something that was flagging in my head that I wanted to bring up, was the nature of like, obviously you have to convey so much of the artist through so little content. And I think there is an element of like trust that like you have to hope that, obviously the artwork itself, the artist as they've kind of presented themselves through their work, coupled with what you're presenting, if hopefully they're reading it, will spur them to further explore either that style or that artist or that moment in time.
Yeah.
But you also talked about, obviously like your research paper writing essentially and the need to whittle down. And I guess like one of the things that I was curious about, which I think goes hand in hand with where this conversation is going, is like, what are your thoughts on like having to balance information, without it being overwhelming and or worse, boring, like how do you do that dance, I guess?
How do you do that? I think,
or is there no answer? Is it just this like you either got it or you don't?
Everyone has their own writing style. I think it's something you have to work towards. I think Gail does that really elegantly, obviously, because she has
30 years of practice
under her belt, specifically with this institution. Me and Laura have talked about it before. The way she writes is poetic, you know? And it does have to be poetic. There has to be a rhythm to it to keep people
lyrical, like I said.
Lyrical,
which I just threw that word
like
out there, but I'm glad that we've come back around to it.
Yeah,
I thought I was going to embarrass myself by just throwing that out there. But
seriously,
you're right.
because you have to say things in a way that sticks in people's heads, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that can be difficult when you're not trying to say anything super, you know, shocking or controversial, but you definitely have to do it in an elegant way. And Gail does a beautiful job at that. Even if you go into the Innes Gallery and you look at, you know, Gail's writing about the works on display, you'll see, because Innes is such a spiritual, philosophical painter.
Yeah.
I think Gail has tailored her writing to exemplify that spirit.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that.
Yeah.
That's actually really, really interesting.
It's poetic. And I love poetry. I know people think poetry is boring, you know. But
no, poetry's awesome. And, you know, as somebody who, you know, I don't write poetry, but I write a lot of fiction, and I have an affinity for reading poetry. And I think, you know, like all things, this show is trying to bridge a lot of gaps. And in a lot of the episodes, obviously not this episode in particular, but a lot of our episodes have been dealing with like the intersection of fine arts and insert X medium, fashion, storytelling, film, photography, jazz, you name it. And yep, like going hand in hand with the storytelling side of things, like poetry is an art form. And to be able to blend that so seamlessly with, you know, these artworks that in a way are like a visual poetry. I think specifically about like Nanette's, you know, abstract work. It's like visual poetry. She equated it to like jazz.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. And it's like, how do you, I guess, capture those things through the labels? Like, obviously you're talking to Nanette and stuff, but you can't like use every single thing that she has to say. Is it really like you're going piece by piece, or is it this like almost, I think about like even also in Interwoven Power, where like Laura set up that exhibition in different, like I think it's 5 thematic sections, if I'm not mistaken. And it's like, do you just have to hope that the audience has the bandwidth to understand the flow of an exhibition and tie that into the labels, and you don't have to necessarily focus on the thematic nature and you can go piece by piece? Or does it have to be this overarching thread, or am I reaching and I have no idea what I'm talking about?
I think it's a mixture of a lot of the things that you're saying.
Overreaching.
I think when you start
No, I'm kidding.
Didn't say that. I think when you're starting to write, Gail is in, you know, the beginning phases, or she's nearing the end of the beginning phases of writing a lot of the copy for Tom Nussbaum's show. It's a lot of just purging like information and trying to relay the experience you had with this artist, with this artwork, as much information as possible. And then you go back, at least for me, you go back and you hone in. And that's where it really comes in handy for us to have communication with other departments as well. So I know that Christine in the past has reached out and said, hey, people might not have experience with this Caravaggio painting that's being depicted in Vic Muniz's chocolate series, you know? So then we would insert a photo of Caravaggio's painting in the label copy. Yeah. Which it does need to make its way around. I think in any creative process, you need to run it by other people. You need to run by it yourself multiple times. You have to sit on it for several months. That's one of the reasons why, you know, the process of curating a show happens so many months or even years in advance. You know, you can spend years trying to figure out what it is that you want to focus on in your labels, in your catalogs, things like that. Yeah,
totally. I think, you know, this kind of deviates away from label writing, but I think it is interesting because I think a unique part of this conversation is your perspective as a young staffer in a museum setting, in a curatorial setting, you know, going through the process of writing and getting critiques. And, you know, I always think back to something that like Laura told me with one of my like videos is like, you know, the notes that she's giving me aren't harsh. They're love. Like editing is love. And I think, do you have any advice for maybe students who are coming up into the curatorial field, or young curatorial professionals like yourself and other institutions, or, you know, whatever, that are, you know, trying to find almost like is companionship a word?
Yeah, companionship's a word.
Sure, we're gonna say it's a word.
But
you know what I'm trying to say. Like, you're trying to find like some sense of like, I guess, you know, camaraderie over like this shared thing. I know, like for me, like, you know, it's not often, but occasionally, like I will chat with contemporaries at other institutions who do my similar job, and you know, we talk about the way that they're marketing their institution, the expectations that they try to set for their, you know, constituents and the people that they're serving, and whether that's the trustees or the actual museum goers or their direct boss. Like, how do you balance the nature of like translating like analytics on social media or a video to like our tangible success as an institution and like what we can expect? Like, obviously I'm getting into the weeds about my job and I'm focused on your job, but like, do you think you have any advice for people up and coming in the industry like yourself, as you did just almost a year ago?
You're saying almost like finding a place where your writing style and the ideals that you are focused on in your wall labels mesh well with the other people on your team. You
said it way more concisely and pointed than I did, but yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's important, and I think if your writing style is true to who you are, how you speak, how you conduct yourself, then you have an easier chance of meshing with whatever team you join, because they interviewed you. They know who you are. It sounds so corny, but it's like basically like, you know, be true to yourself. Like, but like you have to have a certain level of confidence in the things you want to bring to the table and the things you want to say, as well as a certain level of flexibility.
Totally,
like,
yeah.
You can't say, well, I want to write about this and I'm unwilling to
bend.
Yeah. At the same time, in any creative field, if you're writing, if you're an artist, if you're in marketing, you need to be willing to take criticism, and you need to be able to handle that on an emotional level.
Totally, yeah.
You can't
absolutely,
you know, break the second that someone says, hey, I don't really think this works for this particular project.
Absolutely.
You have to trust your teammates.
Yeah.
You know, it's a process, but you stick it out because you love the art.
Totally. I don't want to hold you for too long because we got cut off very early and we had to run down into the galleries for an emergency shoot. So I'm not going to hold you for too much longer. I want to thank you for doing this with me, because I always am very appreciative when I call you in, like for the emergency, like bullpen, like pitcher.
I love yapping. Lucky for you.
But I do have like one or two more things I wanted to kind of cover.
What's up?
And I guess it sounds dumb, but I guess it's kind of the crux of this whole episode. Why should people care about a wall label? Like, you know, I think now, because I have an appreciation and an affinity and a desire to learn more about the artwork that I'm seeing, whether I'm visiting a new institution or even traversing art galleries, like I'm spending more time consciously reading wall labels and learning about the practice or the artist or what have you. But like, I don't know, before I worked here, I probably didn't look at wall labels, like maybe here and there. And it's like, how do you justify, like, why, if you had one, you know, if you had 1 minute to like pitch to somebody, read more, other than just it's important, and you like, why should people stop and read the wall labels?
Art is not static. Art exists within the context of the institution, of the world in which it came to be. Even if you don't necessarily agree with the way the institution is portraying the art, even if you want to get your own read on it. I think it's important to see how an institution is framing something. I think it's important to critique how an institution is framing something.
Totally, yeah.
Everywhere I go, I'm judging the way a show was curated. I'm judging.
I mean, it's your job too, in a way.
Yeah,
like,
but
even
I
if it's not like
even
if it's not like a critical, like malicious critique, it is like you're curious. I mean, you know,
critiquing not in the negative connotation.
Yeah.
I think everyone should be. I think your perspective on the artwork is important, and I think you should be actively trying to figure out how your perspective differs from the perspectives of other people who do have a lot of experience researching this artist and this artwork, and I don't know, I think engage with the world around you. I feel like I've said this on other podcasts before.
But it's fine. It's important.
But you should be actively engaging with the world around you. You should be curious, and you should be willing to have, you know, a conversation about what you think they could have done differently and what you think and we want to hear it. I hang around when I hear tours sometimes just to see what people are saying and to see what they're asking questions about.
I had a really great moment. This is kind of off topic, but
Go ahead.
I had a really nice moment because listeners of this show would remember that, you know, I got to go out to California and do some content work with artist Sarah Sense, who's on view here at MAM and Interwoven Power, and you know, it was a really special thing for me. It was really fun. I got to learn more about Sarah in a really unique and personal way. I got to know her family, and I was in Interwoven on Free First Thursday, just poking around. Sometimes, you know, I want to put the camera around like away because I'm like, you almost get desensitized like to the art. Like today we were just down, like we had to delay this recording because I got called down to film them installing one of the rotating George Innes pieces that I've been documenting the process of reframing, and that's a really special, cool thing. But it's like you're almost not realizing how special of a moment you're in because at the end of the day, you have to get the shot. You have to make sure you get the right quote. You have to do whatever. And sometimes it's just nice to be in the gallery and enjoying the work and being a part of it. And I was spending some time, not with Sarah's work, because I spent a lot of time with Sarah's work before I left, because I just wanted to know it inside and out. And I think I was nearby. I think I was looking at like the salmon skin bag, and Art Hatzopoulos, one of the docents who's been in a lot of our video content. He's great. He's one of the most lively, interesting, entertaining docents we have. Was giving a tour, and he loves Sarah's work. We've done videos with him before talking about the Chitamacha baskets and present state of the English. And I just like sat and like kind of hid behind one of like the cases and like listened, and it was just nice because it was like I had gotten to know and work with Sarah in a very personal way, and I feel like I have this newfound understanding and appreciation for her work, and to see the tour group really be engaged and really care about it was like such a cool and special thing. And, you know, to think that, not to like in a really corny way bring this back to the whole like crux of this episode and the wall label, but it's like that kind of description, that context, that, you know, story, that's because wall label writing is storytelling. You know, between the work of Sarah and the two Chitamacha baskets that are on view, there is this really interesting and intricate story that is like interconnected with one another. And to see people, yes, they're learning it through a docent, but like know that they can get that story from the context that's surrounding the works is really special. Yeah. And I'm rambling again, but like I hope what I'm saying makes sense.
It does.
And connects with this topic.
It does. Because I think you're touching on the same idea that I was touching on before. Like the words you use are important. Like the way people share the way they've seen an object or the way they experience an object is important.
Totally, yeah.
Even in, I'm thinking, sorry.
No, you're good.
Again.
No, you're good.
Even in Interwoven
That's a
Power.
podcast, baby.
Yeah.
That's a podcast. You ramble.
I should start one of these. Even in Interwoven Power, we've made the shift towards, Laura has made the shift towards artist once known being used on the wall labels, as opposed to artist unknown, which has been historically used. It acknowledges a whole, a whole history that was not acknowledged by using the words artist unknown before, as if this object was just lost and exists detached as if the work of art exists as a detached entity from the artist who created it, as if it's detached from the people that, raised this artist that created it. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Art doesn't exist in a vacuum. So I do think words are really important. I think you really have to take a really close look at the way the things you say come across in wall labels, which is kind of my favorite part about it. I love picking it apart and,
Amazing.
I love having it be picked apart.
Yeah. Well, Audrey, thank you so much for coming back on the pod. This has been really great. This has been one of my favorite conversations.
Thank
in the
you
last
for
couple
having
weeks.
me.
Yeah, totally. I'm sorry that I have to let you go back to your actual job now.
Womp womp. No, it's okay.
It's
I love
fine.
it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Audrey. I appreciate it. I'm sure I'll call you in from the bullpen again very soon.
All right. See you guys soon.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of this episode. I really appreciate you hearing us out on this one. I'm really happy with my conversation with Audrey, and I'm sure it won't be the last. She's a great guest on the show, and always provides really, really interesting commentary on the state of curatorial within museums. Anyway, this has been Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. You can find new episodes in your feed every Wednesday at 10 a.m. The Montclair Art Museum is actually open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You can find out about our hours online by visiting us at www.montclairartmuseum.org. We have plenty of stuff going on, from classes to workshops to lectures. There's tons going on here at MAM, and it's really a vibrant place within the community. So please rate and review, subscribe where you can to this show, and I hope that you listen to us next week, and the week after that, and after that, and again after that, and so on.